Hello and welcome to the CX Catalyst. I'm your host, Stephen Banbury, and today I have the absolute pleasure of being joined by Sarah Kinard, who is the founder of the Flamingo Project and the president of the SMPS Foundation. Welcome, Sarah.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, with the Flamingo Project and the SMPS Foundation, maybe you could explain a little bit of what they are and what your role is there.
Sure. So I am the founder and head bird of the Flamingo Project, which is really my way of saying that I do strategy and research for AEC firms. So I do the translation of what the market is actually doing and a firm's vision and help them find their path. As a volunteer with the SMPS Foundation, that's the Society of Marketing Professional Services. So that is the society for your marketers and your business developers in AEC. I'm currently serving as the president of the foundation. I've been on the board of trustees for 3 years. And so I'm constantly thinking in my volunteer life, as well as in my daily professional life, about what forces are really shaping the opportunity in the industry and what's standing between firms and their goals.
Great. That means we'll have a great conversation. Yeah, you've been with that work of growth and strategy on market intelligence. You've been watching this CX conversation develop in the AEC industry for nearly a decade. We did some research with the SMPS Foundation around the state of CX in industry, and we'll get a bit into that research. But maybe you could set the stage for us, Sarah. What does it mean to have a client relationship strategy in 2026 versus maybe just having individual people who are good at relationships?
Sure. So I think our industry has been full of terminology like client focused or client engaged. And that's really about a one-on-one relationship instead of what happens when you're not in the room. So a relationship strategy means that the firm knows the client, not just one person who's been working with them for 10 years. It means there's a documented history, not just a kind of lore of the history. There's structured touch points, and there's a system for understanding how the client wants to be served versus what they're actually getting. When a principal retires or gets pulled into a different project or there's a bad quarter, the relationship doesn't wobble. And that's really the difference between it being a one-on-one versus a system or a way of thinking across your company about what CX is. The firm holds the relationship or the company holds the relationship versus singular individuals. So what most AEC firms have today that haven't implemented a CX program is more of a one-on-one relationship, which is why lots of firms worry about project managers, principals leaving their firm because the relationships leave with them.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. When I was surprised about some of the stats that I read, Sarah, because AEC is fundamentally a relationship business. So, and firms have believed that for generations. So I'm just wondering why in a relationship forward type of industry, that client experience has that formal discipline it's been slow to take root when you think actually would be a natural fit.
So there's a few reasons why, and there's a few reasons why now we have to think differently. Part of that is the tenure for people at firms. They were there for a really long time, sometimes their entire career. So the visibility into the fact that it was a one-on-one relationship was really low because they stayed. There wasn't as much disruption, or when there was disruption like we had in 2008, 2009, those folks just didn't come back. And so you didn't lose a relationship, you actually just lost market at the time. But so the honest answer really is that the industry has focused on relationships versus the strategy around the relationships. And so now with our changing buyer, with firms offering multiple services, so you may have different people who own the relationship at different times. You've got to step back and really think about what that strategy is with that client for your relationship with them. And remember, the client isn't an individual either. The client is the entity So you may have relationships across multiple people. Again, if you offer lots of services, that's pretty typical within an organization. And so are they having a consistent experience across all of those areas of their organization with all of the areas of your organization? So we've got a difference in how the market goes anymore. Who we sell to has changed as well, and their expectations have changed. The emerging trends research that the SMPS Foundation did and released in the summer of 2026. So there's more coming out in summer 2025. So there's more coming out this summer 2026. Really talked a lot about that. Millennials and Gen Zs now hold the majority of the client side roles. And those are digital first, research first buyers who form opinions differently. They also want to engage differently. They do things virtually, and it's difficult to develop relationships in the old models of golf, coffee, and all of that, but they also might not physically be near you at all. So having a strategy as a firm around how you're going to have that relationship is really critical.
Yeah, you've touched on this. I know I've listened to a couple of your podcasts recently, and you draw that distinction between what you call heroic individuals and real systems. And you touched on it a bit about just now about the things that have changed with people leaving and the millennials and Gen Z coming in. So that was seen as a bit of an asset, but now that because of these changes that you've seen in the research that you've done and talking to clients and customers every day, become a bit of a liability.
It really is, because again, our market has become even more multifaceted. What it takes for a project to happen, the number of people involved. I've always said it's a team sport, but the team keeps growing and the specialties within the team keep growing. So historically, there was that heroic individual who was the principal, who knew every client personally, who gets called when something goes wrong, who owns the relationship so completely that when they retire or leave, the client often goes with them. And the industry's really run on that model for a long time because it worked. Conditions were fine for that to be the case. Client focused worked. It was sticky enough. But what's shifted is now clients expect consistency across every interaction with your firm. Brand experience, client experience, that's really the definition, is that there's consistency across all of those touch points across your firm. So it's not just from that one principle they like, it's a seamless experience regardless of who they're engaging with. So if a client has bought structural engineering services from you and now is buying MEP engineering or environmental services, then they know what to expect. It's consistent across the board. And they expect that same quality across those engagements and that relationship to feel really coherent and not like they've hired different departments, right? And so they want to be able to buy different services from the same firm and have it feel like one firm. I'm sure you've had that experience in your personal life where, I don't know, maybe your doctor's office is now offering some sort of new screening or something like that. And you call and it's the very first time you've ever been there. And you say, wait a minute, I've been here for 20 years. Why am I filling out this paperwork? You really want that consistency across the firm because the heroic individual cannot deliver at scale. They aren't geniuses in all of the different areas and facets across your company. They can't possibly be. They're trained and really good at certain work. And so they've reached their limits, and time also has limits, right? So this is also a weakness, and every hero has them. And so that's why you've got to have a system rather than heroic individuals.
Yeah, it's interesting because that sort of seller-doer model really relies on the same person that's expected to win the work, deliver the work, and then also own the relationship. And with the existing and new workforce coming in, that's not necessarily plays to everyone's strengths. Say that your craft is first and foremost, but maybe the soft skills aren't there in the same way. And then there's like the remote aspect. You've described CX as something that can actually rescue the seller-doer rather than replace them. So what exactly do you mean by that, Sarah?
So I think there's something that's really important that we talk about when we're talking about seller-doers today. And there is a structural pressure in our industry, and that is the missing middle. So I'm going to take a second to talk about the missing middle because it's really important to talk about this in conjunction with the conversation of seller doers. So what is that? We have a gap in your 20 to 25 year professional. Those people that would step into senior seller doer roles right now, who have enough technical credibility to be trusted, enough seniority to carry relationships at the right level, of course, because that pipeline, it was cut in 2008 when we had the Great Recession. We had most firms were cut in half during that time. And a number of the people who were laid off during that time never came back to AEC. They are engineers and architects that found UI and UX jobs at Disney and at different places that could hire them because they have that skill set. And they were early enough in their career that they could reposition themselves. Somebody who's in 40, 45, it's hard to reposition yourself. But if you're in your 20s, it's okay. Yep. So we're missing some folks that came up through college, got educated, even got registered, that don't sit here as individuals who can own relationships in the same way that we have historically. That also means leadership in firms. So that whole band that really is leading firms today is that next generation of leadership we've been talking about for a long time. There's just not as many there, which puts a lot of pressure on our seller doers because they need to lead the firms, they need to find the work, they need to lead the teams, they need to mentor, all of the things that go into the historic seller doer model. And that seller doer model worked really well when A, there were more people doing it, and B, the buyers had institutional memory because they stayed at their companies for a really long time. So the conditions today, when you've got folks that maybe don't have that institutional memory on the client side, you've got the bandwidth really taken for those seller doers across multiple leadership roles. Where CX fits in is it's not relying just on them. It's providing a system for them to participate in, to get client intelligence, to anticipate what needs to be done at various stages, and to have some systems that help facilitate that. So it isn't just reliant on that individual when they come back to remember to write a thank you note or to remember what they like for holiday gifts. Think about all those various touch points that seller doers have been empowered to facilitate on their own over time. Now, really everybody is involved. Your accounting team's involved in how you send invoices. Your marketing and business development team's involved in reading the client data to help you understand where you're doing great, where maybe operationally we might need to pour some energy into the company. So it's, when I say team sport for a project, it's a team sport now to take care of that client at the client level.
Yeah, I think it's very well said because often people think about things in silos, like where your job begins and ends. And for a seller doer, it's not just where it begins and ends, but there's all the pieces around that too that make up the whole brand experience and client experience. And it's complicated and it's a shift in the way you do business. It's a pretty fundamental change.
It provides structure. That is the word I overuse in all of this, but we all crave structure as humans. Both the SMPS Foundation and myself done a lot of work with neuroscience, and client experience ties into that because it's really about making people feel safe and secure, your client as well as your employees. And whenever you've got some structure that facilitates that, oh, it's so much better for everyone involved. So I'm really passionate. If you can't tell, I'm really passionate about the seller doer. I am one. I am a seller doer myself. So I understand the challenges that exist for seller doers and how over time we've put too much pressure there, where pressure needs to be about taking care of the client and providing a system around them to do that.
It's when you think about AEC and the complexity around AEC, because unlike some industries, projects can span years, even a decade or more. And they also involve like many people, dozens of people, both sides, some people, a kind of rotating cast of partners and sub-consultants. How do you, when you think about CX in that scenario, how do you design for client experience consistent enough to be a system and flexible enough? You talked about structure, but some flexibility to actually deal with the complexity of the work.
So I want to put the disclaimer out there that I do growth strategy and I am not a CX consultant, but obviously brand experience and the ability to grow, CX is a big part of that. So that's why I've studied CX. I've had a relationship with Client Savvy, now Clearly Rated, for 10 years, because I believe that this is a really important aspect of everything that we do, and growth strategy can't happen, or growth cannot happen without this as a backbone. So I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to answer it probably differently than you expect. Firms win projects, of course, of varying sizes. And historically, the really large, multi-year, long-term projects get a lot of thought because they know they're going to span a decade. They also know they're going to span multiple relationships across their company, the companies that are part of the project team, and multiple relationships across the client. You'll see strategies like having kickoff workshops with strength finders to develop common language. You'll see a lot of things happen with those big, long projects, but what they don't do is map CX alongside it. Mm-hmm. They do a lot of work about how are we going to communicate? What systems are we going to use? And of course, that evolves over time. A 10-year project, technology is going to change. But there's a system set up at least to talk about how we're going to do the thing. There's not necessarily as much thought put into the CX aspect of it. So I would challenge firms that while you're doing that and you're developing these touch points, these milestones within the project, to do that both for your client as well as your partners that you're working with. Because how do you know that it's time to sunset a tool or bring on something else if you don't have a system? So the large projects do get a lot of attention. It's the smaller ones that don't. And so that's where I would say, even if it's a longer term, like a MSA agreement, something like that, where you might have small service, that in particular is a great client experience moment, because that's how you get a bigger scope, is through that tighter relationship. So again, the reason why you need that system is so you have the feedback loop, you have that communication across all of your services so that you can sell more, frankly. You can sell more and deliver better, which more and better, we like that in our industry, right? Again, I'm not going to sit here and set out really a CX strategy. It's more an empowerment of when you know you're going to have a relationship for a defined period of time that is longer than one project, stepping back and saying, what is the CX for this kind of engagement with this kind of client?
Yeah, because during one survey is not going to be enough, and your life will not change with one survey. No. And so having that sort of concept around journey mapping, or because there's lots of peaks and ends within a project depending on the length and complexity, getting that feedback, whether that's electronically or one-to-one or whatever facet, but bringing it all together, then actually, and this is maybe the most important piece, is actually taking action on what you've heard.
Right. The research project that you did with the SMPS Foundation said that 21% of AEC firms collect feedback at key project milestones, and the rest do it occasionally and inconsistently. I don't remember that we had a percentage in that particular report. We might in the new one, around who actually has a plan for follow-up. Because follow-up is where you stand out. Following up based on what they say is key. Again, I go to my personal life, and my dentist has a great CX program. My daughter's going today, in fact, and I will get immediately after the quick rating and any information that I want to share. And interestingly enough, the last time I went, my husband went 2 hours before me. We had no idea we scheduled on the same day. And there was a new hygienist. And boy, that was not the experience I was accustomed to at their office. And you know what? I put it in the feedback and they called. And they called to let me know that was a temp hygienist that is not invited back. And so that feels good. It feels like I was heard. I know I'm not going to walk in and have that hygienist again. That felt good, right? And so yes, that's a key moment. I just visited and I provided the feedback and they responded back to me.
Yeah, it's something that when you do get feedback that is negative, that your posture should be, oh, that's interesting. I wonder why they said it.
That's
and
right.
then be in contact and do
And
that.
they picked up the phone and called.
Yes, it makes a huge difference. I had a guest on somewhat recently and they talked about getting some negative impact and they reached out and then had a call and a person was like, oh my God, you're a real person. I thought it was an AI bot or an agent. So that personal is so important, especially enabling trust through these type of programs is, I don't want to say it's a new currency, but when relationship is so important, building that trust through a CX program that's journey based is super important. It's talking about the actually implementation of it or like actually there's a new report coming out end of July that we're going to be sharing at SMPS's annual summit Amplify. So I'm excited to do that. And hopefully we can do a follow up and talk about it. But in last year's report, one of the couple of stats were that 44% of firms have no one formally responsible for CX, which I think is probably not that much of a surprise. And only 2.5% have I don't think you have half a person, or maybe you can, dedicated CX leader. So when firms do invest in this role, it's a hard question, but where should it live? And what's the biggest misunderstanding about what that person actually does?
I love this question because on the strategy side of things, I talk a lot about this, especially for a firm. Where does it need to sit? And I don't think that there's a one size fits all answer to this because CX is about everything you do. It's not just one department. And for some companies, they stick it in marketing and business development and expect it just to be a marketing and business development initiative. So if that's the culture of your firm, don't stick it there. But other companies realize that what they need is they need somebody who is a thinker beyond the doing. And so a lot of the times you hire people in marketing and business development that think beyond the doing to help with this. So then that is a good place for them to sit. This is a very operational role. And I think that's one of the biggest misnomers. So sometimes it needs to sit in operations. And I'll detail why it's really operational and a misnomer in just a second. So it can sit in just about any spot within the organization. I think the critical thing to understand is this role is rarely client facing. People will hire this role thinking that they individually, as a hero, are going to interview every single one of your clients one-on-one. And that's not a system, by the way. That's a hero again. So it is, since this is a system, you're setting up something that works in parallel with your marketing and business development operations, in parallel with your project operations. It's really operational in nature because you're getting data and you're saying, what do we do with this data? How does this inform our business? How does this inform how we go out for work? How does this inform how we do this service? How does this inform how we work with this client? So there's actually a lot of interpretation that's got to happen with this. And so I'm a big believer in it needs to sit in the side of the organization that provides a space to do that. So if you're immediately going to stick it in marketing and business development and think it's only a marketing and business development deal, you're wrong. I've seen companies put this in HR successfully because HR is working with marketing and BD on the CRM and HRIS and empowering people both business developers as well as their employees. I've seen it sit in operations. It's really a matter of needing to step back and understanding your company and how your company has rolled out initiatives that work across all aspects and where there's been success and where assumptions have gone wrong.
Yeah, it's a really good point you make there, because you think CX is the person that's going to be talking to clients. And of course they do, not as frequently as hopefully the person that's managing that relationship, right?
That's right.
So yeah, having the change management, I think it's sometimes underestimated what bringing a CX program, a true program, and you have to start somewhere, right? It's not going to become encultured like straight away. It takes time, can take years to get to like real CX maturity.
I also want to answer that question with probably something we'll talk about again. And CX is a really great way to solve existing challenges your business has. And so defining what that is right now is also the way to decide where it sits. So I've had the pleasure of facilitating various conversations across really my entire network because of the work that I do, because of the work with the foundation. And what I love when we have people who have CX programs, what they talk about is they did their baseline survey to start and say, where do we have a problem? And let's go solve that one. Some of them realize that they don't know their clients on the pursuit side of things. And so they say, all right, this needs to sit right now for marketing and business development. Others realize they've got an operational problem. They're losing money left and right on projects. Their margin is not what it's supposed to be. And through that process, learn that they need to do some training. They need to do some mentoring. And they may have the wrong project manager paired with the wrong client. Not because the project manager's no good or the client's no good. It's just not the right pairing. So again, I like to tell people, start there. Understand and define the problem that you want CX to solve first. Because to your point, you said, change management wise, we can't boil the ocean here. That is entirely too much for us humans who still need to design and build projects to take every aspect of what we do all day long and change it. So
I think that's really good guidance, because I think you can get, if you really start having deep discussions around CX, you could become overwhelmed by it. And really, you just need to do that perception study, find a use case. I think that's certainly true with AI, Gen AI, where you're like, it's so much and so overwhelming. And the way to get started is find a use case and then go play and go figure that out. It sort of ties in a little bit to the research showing that firms generally think they're above average when it comes to client experience, because I talk to my clients, I know them, they're really happy, but they actually overestimate their performance relative to really the client perspective. And tough question for you, Sarah, but how do you have that conversation with a leader, right, that's already confident that they're doing well and doing that in a way that really doesn't put them on the defensive?
So because I have the pleasure and honor, honestly, of being hired to talk to people's clients, I really believe that is such a gift. I get to hear the stories and I get to carry those back to companies as we're building out where they're going to go and to make sure that their values are aligning with their clients and all kinds of different things. And of course, it sometimes surfaces because I'm not necessarily doing it 100% for CX. I'm doing it for a number of things. CX, of course, becomes part of the conversation. And I'm given the opportunity to clarify their position with some of those clients. And so it's not really it's a challenge. It's more, I help them understand that they are doing a self-assessment. And so sometimes when we do self-assessments, we score a little high. I'm one of those people that scores low. And you say, is it a 10? I'm like, it's never a 10. So I'm that one. And we have clients that way, of course. So our self-assessments aren't necessarily the best gauge because depending on who's doing the self-assessment, they've either been way too ingrained in the relationship or they don't really have enough background. The other part is, unless we're scoring our client the same way they're scoring us, it doesn't matter what we score. It doesn't, because we're not hiring us. They're hiring us. So I like to say, listen, here's the deal. You may have a score that comes back and surprises you and delights you. You may have a score that comes back and you say, oh, that's not real. It is real. And understanding the what behind it is our job now, because a score that is lower than industry average or lower than you want is really just a call for action. There's no one to get upset with. It just says, hey, we've got some stuff to improve and let's decide what we're going to do. I like to have a conversation about not what you believe, but what do you know? Because that helps us. And that's really what CX is about. It's giving us data to know something. So it's already starting to change the dialogue. So what do you know? Can you tell me what drove your last 3 renewal contracts, if it's like an MSA or another contract with the same client? Was it genuine loyalty? Was it cost? Was it path of least resistance with the client? Do you know what your clients are saying if someone neutral asked them what it's like to work? Do you know? And the only way to know is to ask. So to me, these baseline surveys are really important. But again, I want to caution, you're capturing them at that moment in time. You're not capturing them at milestones and projects. You're capturing them potentially a year after the building's operational and all of the kinks have been worked out. Or when you've just had your first design meeting and it's also aspirational and wonderful. Or when the first bids came in and now, we got to do some alignment of design and construction cost. So you're catching the relationship at a specific time that isn't necessarily systematic either when you do a baseline. A baseline's a good place to start, but it's not the end all be all because you don't know when you're catching them.
Yeah, no, I agree. When, for a firm leader or leaders listening to this episode and they want to take action this week, tomorrow, right. There's a lot of urgency now because of what we've been talking about, and maybe another 6-month transformation. But if there was like one honest move, what would you tell them?
So it's going to sound like a big answer. Move toward a system. That's the move. And I know that what do I do? No worries. I got you. But move towards a system. That's the direction I want you to move towards, because we've done a lot of, hey, let's get in a room and let's map out some milestones and the gifts that we're going to get. We've done that as an industry for a long time, and it relies on the hero to execute it. So I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to sit down and journey map first. That's not the place to start. It really isn't. It's fun. It's fun to journey map. I have a good time with it. But let's make it something a little bit more concrete and moving towards a system, because Tuesday morning is not the time to build a system in a vacuum. We've got to start building towards. So this is my move. Your next leadership meeting, you probably have one weekly. Set aside 15, 20 minutes. Have everyone in the room. List your top 5 clients by revenue or strategic importance. The list will look different because different people in the room. That's okay. It's important. Because those are the relationships that are going to help you grow or keep you nice and stable. So you've made your list. Now, write down what you genuinely know about the relationship with each. Not what you assume, but what you know. Do you have recent feedback? And by recent feedback, like the last 90 days even. Let's be generous. Do you have any data from the last 90 days? Do you know who the decision maker is for their next engagement? And have you had a conversation with that person in the last 90 days? And that's going to help people realize that this structure and system that you build is enabling. It really is red light, green light, yellow light. Have we had the conversation? Have we not had the conversation? Do we know what's next? Do we not know what's next? And it helps people understand what you're working towards. There's still a lot in between there. Don't get me wrong. But that's what I would do, because that's what that's going to do, is it's going to help you get honest about your exposure and your opportunity.
Yeah, everyone should take that on board. So yeah, that's awesome. So you serve, obviously you're founder of the Flamingo Project, and you serve as the president of SMPS Foundation. And so you're watching this space, AEC space, closely from multiple vantage points. What's the thing about where CX is headed in AEC that you don't think enough people are really talking about yet?
We are not having enough conversations about how our buyer is changing. And CX is going to be such an important part of solving for that. When I say solving for that, there's already data out there around the invisible choices that are being made. And now with AI and generative AI, there's even more invisible choices that are being made with existing relationships. So understanding how that new buyer is making decisions, what tools they're using, who their sphere is, including AI, that's helping to advise them. That's something that's going to be really important, because here's the deal: on time, on budget is table stakes, and we've got to stop talking about that. Standing out through CX, building trust and loyalty so that they aren't leaning in to the invisible tools, they're coming to us instead. That's why I really believe that CX is an important part moving forward, but it's an important part because of the buyer changing and the invisibility that is out there. Basically, it's so nebulous how you make a decision. I recently had someone reach out to me and said that AI suggested that they reach out to me for market research. I was thrilled because I've worked very hard on that. But at the same time, I went, see, there it is. There it is. So I don't think we're talking enough about the changing buyer and how CX can really help keep that loyalty sticky.
Yeah, and I think with AI, I don't want to say flattening the field or like moving differentiation, like it's harder to differentiate. So actually, CX, I think, has never been more important now than it's more important now than ever.
And we will understand how that buyer is changing and making different decisions through CX. That's going to give us the intelligence. That's the other aspect that's really important here, because right now where we sit, certain markets still are very institutional. So somebody might be listening to this podcast, honestly, Stephen, and say that hasn't happened yet for us because the tenure is long. Pick a city, maybe a transportation department. But even there, they're starting to see, because of budget cuts, program management companies come in and there's no loyalty there, right? There's none, unless you already have, your company already has a relationship with that company. So CX is where we understand how to make those moves, how to change how we're doing certain things. Because I really believe that the next decade, the firms that are going to win are going to understand how a buyer makes decisions, because how they make decisions is also how they're going to make decisions in a project. And there's an enormous amount of growth that I feel like is being left on the table right now because people don't know what's driving that decision to yes.
I could obviously keep talking, and I know we have limited time, Sarah. We've covered a lot of ground, and like your insights have been fantastic and engaging. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you have a burning desire to get across? I feel we've covered a lot, but if there's anything that you want to share beyond, please do.
I just want to empower people to understand how CX can help their business in every way. One of the things we haven't touched on, Stephen, in this conversation is its value in M&A. And I think that's an important part of what's happening in our industry. M&A is not new. Private equity is no longer new, yet we still talk about it like it is. And CX already being established in your company, a language to communicate with your clients is exceptionally valuable in the transition of relationships. And that can be in generational changes in relationships. That can be in changing your company's name because you've been acquired. It can be in lots of different transitions. And so that is the one thing we didn't talk about is the value of CX in those transition moments, but specifically M&A and PE. It's valuable. You've actually got a measurement of the value of your relationships to include in your company valuation.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. That's very important.
Yes,
So,
it's something as I talk again with firms about their growth strategy and they don't know which is their path. I say, listen, just having your books look a certain way, the value of your business is your clients. And understanding the value of those relationships is key in those moments of either a new principal buying into the company. It doesn't have to be a huge change like an M&A or PE, but it's really important. And the reason it's important is because of what it can do for your business.
yeah. Sarah, thank you very much again for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. And yeah, maybe we'll have to do this again and talk more M&A.
Sure.
So that's great. Thank you for your time, Sarah. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.